Hi all, I hope you guys are doing fine and have written answer to today's question. Also, I urge you all to get your answers evaluated on the platform of CollectorBabu. Let's not waste a lot of time and start discussing today's question. So, the topic for today was GS3 and GS1, and the topic was art and culture. We have 3 questions which are PYQs. So let us delve into them and try to answer. So the first question is, Persian literary sources of medieval India reflect the spirit of the age? Comment. So what you're going to do in this question, we are going to talk about Persian literary sources and them reflecting the spirit of the age. So, what are the ways through which any literature, any piece of literature can reflect the spirit of the age? First is because if we talk about Persian literary, they were historical accounts of the chronicles of kings and what were the deeds and the activities. It captures it. Then the literary aspect, including poetry, talking about love, the life of common people, etc. Then Sufi literature, how Sufi literature united men and God. And then a lot of translation and adaptations were done reflecting the spirit of the age of the medieval India and a reflection of social and culture milieu. So these are some of the points which you can use to build forth your answer. So in this case, what are you going to do? Obviously, firstly, in the Persian literary sources, you can talk about how Persian became the court language under the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire, etc., and how these sources became invaluable insight into the socio-political, cultural, spiritual ethos of the time. Okay, so this is a small introduction, and then we can talk about the various aspects I just discussed. So in the historical accounts, obviously you can give you can write names of a lot of Persian books which you know. Here some of the names are importantly which you might know is Abul Fazl's Akbarnama. Okay, this is something definitely you should be knowing. And then talking about Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, obviously you might not know, remember the author, but from prelims knowledge, you might be able to bring forth some of the books and the knowledge. But obviously Akbarnama, you might remember Ziauddin Barani's Tariq-e-Firoz Shahi, okay, the seminal work documenting the political and administrative development. Then talking about how these texts reflects the ideal of governance, the challenges of empire building, etc. 2 points are more than enough. And then you can come to the second point, talking about poetry, Persian poetry under Amir Khusro, okay, blending Persian, Arabic, and the Indian tradition to create unique blend of poetry, okay. And then there were multiple themes from love, devotion, and ephemerality of life, etc. So these are the important points which you can write. And in the third, in the Sufi literature, obviously you can talk about luminaries like Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia, Hazrat Khusro. Okay, so there are multiple names which you can keep on writing, which obviously Nizamuddin Aulia, to in any case you might know. So these are some of the names which you are able to bring out. Then talking about Rumi, obviously, and the writing of other Sufi saints. Okay, so here you have given some of the names which are important. Then the third thing which happened in Persian, which are the adaptations. Obviously, adaptations of Sanskrit texts like Mahabharata, Panchtantra, etc., under the reign of Akbar, under Jahangir, etc. All this reflected the spirit of accommodation and integration, which were characteristic of those times. I mean, not exactly, but obviously under Akbar, this fusion of Din-e Ilahi, okay, it emanated. And then talking about the reflection of social cultural milieu, how through blend of Persian only, Urdu developed, blend of Persian and Indian languages, Hindi, this Urdu developed. So you can, and how it was a part and parcel of the life of people in the medieval India. So it reflected the spirit of the age. That is how you'll just finish your first answer. You can just conclude by writing this Urdu statement in your conclusion itself. So in the end, you can just say, by documenting political histories, celebrating poetic brilliance, embracing Sufi mysticism, and translating ancient text, these sources were the syncretic and pluralistic character of medieval Indian society. I think it's more than clear. Okay, so let us now discuss the second question, which is very factual question, talking about the Asian and Greco-Bactrian element in Gandhar art. But again, generally people do not study it dividing. Like, okay, these are the Central Asian element, these are the Greco-Bactrian elements. But obviously, uh, through an understanding of various examples, from Gandhar art, etc., and your knowledge, you might be able to analyze something and bring forth some points to write in your answer, even though you might feel uncomfortable in the beginning of the question. So, Gandhar art, obviously, you can give an introduction talking about the basics of Gandhar art, like the time period when this Gandhar art emerged, the region around which the Gandhar art emerged, and what were the influences, talking about the influence of Alexander the Great's conquest and the subsequent rule of Indo-Greek, Kushan, etc. So that gives you a very basic insight into the Gandhar art, which you will use as an introduction. Then you can just make a table and talk about Hellenistic and Greco-Bactrian element in Gandhar art. In the Hellenistic element, you will be talking about how realistic portrayal of human anatomy, draped garments similar to Greek and Roman togas, okay, and anthroposter posture. Okay, so you will be talking about these, and then you talk about some Greco-Bactrian element. For the Greco-Bactrian element, you will be talking about naturalistic facial features, including almond-shaped eyes. I mean, I'm just saying that obviously you cannot pinpoint what are the exact Greco-Bactrian element, Hellenistic element, Central Asian element, etc. But try to put forth some points which you know and can correlate with the wider Greek influence or the Central Asian or the Hellenistic influence. Okay, so you can talk about arc designs, you can talk about use of wine scrolls. Okay, so like these are some of the points which you can bring forth. Again, this is a very factual question. You might not be able to build a lot of points if you don't know the exact features, but again you can give some examples like depiction of Buddha and the halo, and anthropomorphic representation. Okay, so these are some of the points, but again, do not beat yourself too much if you're not able to put a lot of answer to this. You can give example, you can just talk about Gandhar art in general and how it was influenced, but because it has been clearly asking the Central Asian and Greco elements, you might not be able to answer it if you do not know. So don't beat yourself too much, but try to bring out some of the points from your residual knowledge about the use of facial features, how certain might have wavy hair or whatever. Okay, so that answers the question. And talking about use of gray schist or stucco, and carving in the rocks themselves. So these are some of the various aspects which you can highlight. In the end, you can just talk about how Buddhist visual tradition, the Gandhar art, it just uh, enriched the Buddhist visual tradition, and just testament to the enduring legacy of cultural dialogue and artistic innovation across region and civilization, or how Gandhar art had influenced later on in the Indian architecture in the sculpture domain as well. Okay, so these are some of the ways in which you can bring forth innovation in your answer. But again, this is a very factual question. Write whatever you know, at least attempt the question. And then the third and the last question is, early Buddhist stupa art, while depicting folk motifs and Narrative successfully expounds Buddhist ideals. Elucidate. So, one thing which is a must in this question is making the diagram of stupa. Okay, you cannot answer this question without that, or you'll risk losing marks. Okay, so make a fairly detailed diagram of stupa. Okay, any stupa, Sachi stupa, well and good. Okay, so after that, what you're supposed to do? After that, you can just write. Stupas are among the oldest architecture. You can just give a short insight into stupa. When was the first time that stupa was found in the Indian history, or how is stupa and Buddhism linked in a very short introduction? Or you can just do this timeline format, make it very small, and just write it in the introduction itself. Then you have to talk about Buddhist philosophy depicted in stupas. Okay, there are a few things you know. Obviously, about Chhatri, you know there are three lines: Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Okay, so these 3 points you have to write, because this basically, you know, around the Puranas there are Jataka stories made and engraved. So obviously, even that you know. And in the stupa themselves are the relics of Buddha kept, or in the later stupa, relics of other important monks kept. So these are some of the points which you can talk about. Okay, so let us visualize and try to answer how we are going to approach this question. So the various features. First would be Anda, dome. You can talk about represents the world mountain, signifying the cosmic order and the Buddhist universe. Encloses the relics, embodying the impermanence of life and cyclical nature of existence. Okay. Then you can talk about Yatsi, a vertical mast rising from the Anda, symbolizing axis mundi, or the cosmic connection between heaven and earth, reflects the path to enlightenment, bridging the material and the spiritual realms. Harmika, the sacred enclosure, demarking the sacred realm. Okay. Then Turanas, gateways. Okay. Then a Chhatri, three-tiered umbrella, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Okay. These all symbolizes the protection and unity of Buddhist followers. Then there are various other facts related to stupas, which you can point out. Like the four gates symbolizes the four very important events, east, west, north, south, the four very important events that took place in Buddha's life: Buddha's birth, his death, first sermon, and the when he left his house. Okay, so the four gates symbolizes that. Then the shape of stupa is like shape of sitting Buddha in meditation. So you can just talk about a few of those aspects and how both the stupa has been representative of Buddhist philosophy. But in the question, there was also one statement talking about how they have incorporated folk motifs and narratives. So the Jataka tales incorporates folk motifs. Okay, then you can talk about the significance of it. So that the philosophy, the religious principles, or the sermon of Buddha, they are not too much distinct and otherworldly to people, but they are able to understand it because the narrative given to them is from their own folk tales. Okay, so it heavily incorporates folk elements such as lotus flowered animal, tree, bridging local tradition with Buddhist ideals. So the philosophy doesn't seem too complicated about renunciation, enlightenment, etc. Okay, in the end, you can just say the stupas, they did not just function as sacred spaces for worship, but also as mediums for disseminating the message of Buddhism to diverse audience. By integrating folk motifs and narratives, they bridge local context with universal Buddhist ideals, okay, which ensured their widespread appeal. So we are done with the art and culture segment. If you have any particular question as to how you're going to approach art and culture question for mains, please write down in the comments, but also try to understand that there is this limitation. Either you have to be prepared very well and very thoroughly with all the core static concept, which you should ideally, but in case you do not know them, then it's even okay to know your limitation and write whatever suffices the context of the question and move forward. Okay, so that you give your time to other question. Here the Hellenistic and Greco-Bactrian element, those you might not basically know at the given time when it was asked in the question, and it's all right. So try to talk about how much you know. If in art and culture you are able to incorporate figures, please do, and maps marking the demarcating the area, even then it's all right. For example, in the Gandhar question, what you could have done if you don't know basic elements, obviously you can talk about features of Gandhar art which you have already learned while in your prelims, in your mains. It's very simple and everybody learns that. Okay, so and then you can just talk about, yes, both it had influence of Central Asia and Greco-Bactrian, and then you can, the major features of Gandhar art are, and then you can write. Obviously it does not specifically address what the question is asking, but at least you're talking which is relevant to the question. Then you can make a map highlighting the Gandhar region, which we have used in introduction. If you have any diagram related to it, okay, like some Gandhar art diagram, then you can just draw it, talking about the features, and you can point out and draw features. For example, wavy hair, for example, halo around, halo behind the head. Okay, so these are some of the ways in which you can try to ensure that you have written answer to even those questions which you do not particularly know. I hope I have made myself fairly clear, and please take care and keep writing, and hopefully you guys will flourish with flying colors. And bye bye, take care.